Welcome to the TJ Malden Leadership Podcast, where we talk about life, leadership, and the gospel. Hey, welcome to the TJ Malden Leadership Podcast. I cannot wait to just let you meet a friend of mine that's here today. It's weird saying friend because he's more like family. I've called him my big brother, I guess, for about 24 years. 24 years. I know we're old, man. This is Mark Cunningham. Mark Cunningham is the executive pastor, that's the correct title, executive pastor at Heritage Church in Moultrie. And I want to let you get to know Mark a little bit, but then I want to ask Mark a few things about leadership. Mark is someone that I consider to be an incredible leader. He has a way of helping people feel their value, experience their value, and then really calling them up to the next level of leadership. I've witnessed it in his life. He's been incredible at building a family around him, people that love to volunteer, people that love to serve. And he's really good at reduplicating himself. So today, I want to just talk to him for a few minutes about who he is, where he comes from, and a little bit about leadership, if he will let us. Yeah. So, Mark, I'm really glad to have you, man.
Man, I'm glad to be here. And that whole family thing is for real. My Branson's 9, and he's our youngest. And so I'm telling him about Uncle TJ. He doesn't know you quite like that, but the older two definitely do. You're Uncle TJ. You're my little brother, and Even when I should be embarrassed a little bit. No, that's my little bro, man. Leave him alone. No. So I'm honored to be here. Glad to be here, man.
Glad you're. Mark, tell me a little bit, if you can. Your history has always been fascinating to me. Where you are now in life as a minister. I remember seasons of your life where you really grew up in an impoverished community. Yeah. In a lot of ways, you grew up in a very small church, and you started pastoring when you were 18 years old, right? And then not long after that, you bought a van. And this is a true story. You bought a van and started driving around.
You didn't tell me. No,
you started driving around the country evangelizing. So, if you can, just explain to me. I remember stories of you saying, you lived in a neighborhood in a part where you and your dad would be outside, and you'd be digging ditches or fixing plumbing, and all the kids would ride by on the school bus, and you grew up differently. And just unpack your childhood a little bit for me, just so we can have a snapshot of who you are and what's kind of informed you.
Yeah, I mean, you asking me that question sort of takes me back. I did grow up in a very poor community, poorly educated. There wasn't, just not a lot of opportunities and not a lot of, experience. And so, as a kid, my dad was disabled, come from a family of a rare hereditary disease that takes away the function and mobility. And so my dad was struggling with that when I was very young. He was a pastor. And as that began to take hold of his body, it sort of, there was a moment where we were sort of, I don't want to say climbing the ladder, but things were getting a little better. And then he got really sick, and we had to kind of downsize life, and ended up in my hometown, a little small town that I love, Weewahitchka, Florida. Yeah. And so my graduating year, one particular memory, just as you were speaking, we were having to dig a septic tank in the front yard, and I was on my senior high class trip, headed, a place really I'm not sure how I afforded to go, but I was on the bus with them, and as we ride by, if I were being transparent about it, I was mortified, and I knew my house was coming. It wasn't very nice at all. I didn't even have a bedroom because of my dad's disability and the income financial change. My bedroom was a couch, and what my sister had as a room was, it was basically a closet. They had a built-in closet, and you could walk in, and there her bed was on the side. And so anyway, we ride by this place, and all my friends are there, and I'm just praying inside. Nobody noticed. And of course, somebody hollers at the bus, "Hey, Mark, isn't that your dad?" I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
and my parents really loved the Lord. I watched them live that kind of, just an example of true love for Him and sacrifice and those kinds of things. And it planted some deep seeds in me. But, you know, that's probably one of the biggest memories I have as far as, you know, where I come from. And ironically, that was where I began preaching pastoring at that same place.
Yeah, one thing I loved about your dad is that until he met Jesus, he loved even through his disability, through his brokenness, when his body failed him, his heart for God was still just on fire always. Yeah. And he said some funny stuff. I love listening to him talk. Yeah. And we had great conversations. But his longing for God and just his yearning for a miracle and seeing Jesus was always so fresh anytime you were around him. And I was grateful to be a part of that anytime I got to be around him. Yeah. And for you, I feel like that's informed you walking through that suffering with your dad. Now, tell us the name of the disease that he had.
Levopontocerebellar degeneration is the classification, which is a classification of a lot of degenerational, and his particular one had a specific manifestation. But
so I don't want, if you don't want to go here, you don't have to at all. But would you kind of unpack for people listening what that might do to the body and kind of the implications for your family? Like and the reason I want to build it this way, if we can, and just have this conversation in this way, is that like you're a man who leads his family to Jesus. You love God. And every time I see you, every time around you, we talked about it. You led worship with us here the other night, and everybody's comment's always the same, man. When I'm around Mark, there's this level of joy and authenticity, and like there's always going to be laughter, but you've walked through some incredible, really kind of profound suffering. Yeah. And I think it's important to lay that groundwork when people see the joy in your life and they see you cling to Jesus. It's through everything you've been through, you have this amount of joy that just spills out onto other people. And in leadership, I think that's important because you walk, as a leader, you walk through suffering, you walk through hardship, you walk through difficulty, and being able to, it's almost that, not putting on you on the level of an apostle, right? But having that, like in all things, like I know what it is to be in danger from Robert Paul, you know, in the New Testament. He's I've been through this and I've been through that, but man, I count it all joy. Right. And you've been able to somehow manifest that. And I know it's through the grace of God, and that's what you'll attribute it to. But unpack for us a little bit, maybe some of the suffering, if you don't mind, that your family's walked through and the loss from this one specific disease that you've witnessed.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking about that. That's a big part of my life story and who I am, and ultimately, I think what God's crafted inside of me personally. The disease actually, the cerebrum in the brain begins to die, and they're not sure why, if it's deficiency or just a time, you know. Anyway, that begins to die, and as it does, the motor functions go away. So like the early on symptoms, if you were to encounter someone that was struggling, if you would have seen him early when the disease was first taking over, he would look like someone who was drunk. So slurred speech, staggering, his motor skills were hindered. And sadly, he was mistaken for that quite a few times. So, you know, that's probably some of the earlier pain that I think I could remember as a kid, just trying to go somewhere to a high school football game and watching him grab a hold of rails and stagger to the top and have a slurred speech, and people might make a comment not knowing, in ignorance, and just assuming the wrong thing. And so that progressively gets worse. Eventually, they end up in a wheelchair. Then, the ability to eat, swallow, the fine motor skills go away, and so you end up with malnourishment. One thing that really happens is, through, and I guess it's okay to talk about, but is even up to death. It turns into, aspirating in the lungs, food, the muscles that control and separate oxygen and food get confused and can't control themselves. And so you end up with a lot of moments of pneumonia is what actually ends up taking them. And so that played such a big role for me, because I lived with this constant sense of urgency. And So, you know, if somebody were to come to me and, you know, even a few, you know, years ago when I just think all throughout my childhood, I just lived with this sense that life is passing you by. You know, I'm 16, and I think, you know, because it being hereditary, and I've had people ask me this question 1,000 times. Why did you go get tested to see if you had it? And I'm not even sure they can do that kind of testing with this. I'm sure they can today, but at that time, I'm not positive they could have in those days. But you know, no one wanted to know for sure, you know, that you were going to get this. And so, as it happened, like I did funerals for, you know, my earliest funerals at 19 were my uncles, people that I were very. One of my uncle Ronnie, he was, I called him Roscoe Pico Train. He took me fishing, he took me hunting. I was his son, and he had didn't have a wife, and you know, he would be he's not the first, but one of the first ones that I'd hold his hand as he took his last breath in the hospital room. And so, you know, from him, it was my Uncle Larry first that died when I was 18, and then a year or so later, it wasn't a few years later, my Uncle Ronnie died, and then a little while after that, his twin brother, my Uncle Pinky, died. I did both their funerals. Then my two cousins, which are my Uncle Pinky's daughters, one was a year older than me, one a year less than me. I would stand over their casket and do both, and very, very close to them. And I just had to make what God worked inside of me is I had to make a decision of what did I believe about God.
That's what I want to add. That's really what I want to dig in. How seeing all of that suffering and brokenness, like your joy, your love for God, your desire for other people, because I'm just going to be honest with you, a lot of people who sit on that side of the table, right? Like they lose one family member and they're like, I'm going to endure this. They lose the second family member. They're like, okay, I can make it. And then you buried
it gets,
5 or 6,
it gets further,
and then preached your father's funeral, and at the end of that, at his funeral, imploring people to follow this Jesus that you're following. And so what is it about Jesus? Let me just ask it that way. What is it about Jesus that makes him so worthy of suffering to you and for you?
I think it's a great question. And so at 44 years of age and being around ministry all my life, and then in ministry for a large portion of my life, I've asked myself that question a few times. Yeah. And it's not like when I'm standing up in a funeral, you know, my sister's, she's, as you saw her, you know, she's in a wheelchair right now, and I'm healthy, you know, and it brings a whole new dynamic when you think about your celebrations in life, and then you turn around and the person you want to celebrate with the most that's here on this earth, you want to be like, yes, you know, just maybe I got a promotion, or this good deal just came through, or I'm getting a new house. I want to be so excited. I want to look around and look at my sister and be like, and then I see her suffering. And the thing that I've learned, I think the thing that's really, because if you would ask me at this different times, I would have had different answers. And I don't know, you come back and ask me 2 years from now, it may change a little bit, right? So, but the thing that Jesus always reminds me of, and I see so passionately in the scriptures, more than I've ever seen before, is his preference or his love for others. And it's like anytime I want to look at myself, like I can look inwardly, and when I look inwardly, well, it sucks. I mean, can I say that on the podcast? Right. So it's like, it's terrible. I don't have a dad. My kids don't have a granddad. My mom doesn't have a husband. My sister doesn't have a father. She's lost her baby boy at a young age. My kids, they don't have a granddad. On either side of my family, you're just crying for adoption, for someone to love. And it's like, well, you start looking at all that, it's easy to run out of here and go get a little depressed. Like, you know, maybe I shouldn't be here. But every time I see, I mean, just at the cross, and this is, I mean, I might get emotional, but this is at the cross, Jesus is having a conversation with someone, and he's considering someone other than himself. As a gamble for his robe, number one, he's like, he prays this prayer of Father, and it's like, when you make a decision that I believe this was real, and I believe in him, and now I want to be like him, and you see him at his death, even to the sinner beside him, saying, remember me. And he'll make a promise. It's like, well, as long as I'm looking inward, then I can get, well, there's a lot more.
Dark.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
It can get dark quick. But when I see him looking out and always looking for someone else. And so for, it's like you hear me, you describe me as a person of joy. I feel like I am. I want to be, but I genuinely love people. And so when I get in a room, like there's people in this room I'm not sure I know exactly. And I'm tempted to, even as we're talking, like I want to interact with them a little bit and see who they are.
Sure.
Because what I found out was, man, I've had a lot of loss, but I'm not by myself. And when you start to realize that, it's like, our hope is Jesus.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's what preachers say. That's what church leaders are supposed to get up and say, but there's a conviction in my heart. So I remember making a decision. I got to say this real quick. One of the things that I'm really harping on these days is when I'm reading about Jesus or the Scripture. After I'm asking myself this very important question: do I believe that? And if I do believe that, what decision am I going to make about it?
How does that impact everything from that moment?
Right.
Every time you read it, whatever it is.
Whatever it is. And so I get excited when somebody brings up. And so when you make that decision that I do believe in this, then this has to have influence in my life. That starts you down a road where that you can find joy in the things that I think, and that's one of the promises of God, joy unspeakable.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So
in the face of anything that you walk through or walk into, I think just knowing you and knowing the level of suffering you've experienced on so many different levels, and then watching your leadership. This is one thing that, and this has always been you, and this is one of the things that I kind of wanted to ask you. The first time that, and I'm going to shift gears here for just a minute if I can, but I remember the first time that we met, I was not a believer in Jesus. I was hostile towards the gospel.
You were angry,
to say the least. I was angry. I was hostile towards the gospel. Did not want anything to do with church people, or to the extent that I was shooting up a church with a paintball gun during a women's prayer breakfast.
A Saturday women's prayer breakfast.
Saturday women's prayer breakfast, and I was covering the windows of a church with paintballs.
Yeah.
And you walked up and you started conversation. And I remember in that moment, you just brought me in and had a conversation. You didn't tell me to stop.
No.
And it's been so informative for me as a leader, but you just wanted a conversation. And that conversation led to so many more conversations, and ultimately to me surrendering my life to Christ, New Year's Eve, my sophomore year of high school. I bring that up because that seems to be the pattern of your life, that you don't really lean on people in leadership to make them shift their behavior immediately or get a product out of them, but you really want to create conversation. And so as a leader, not just an executive pastor or worship leader, both you're phenomenal at, but as a person that leads people, what do you look for in someone when you say, man, this is the kind of person that I want to develop, or this is what when I'm looking to pour into someone, or I'm looking to build the family, I'm looking to add value, like, this is what I'm looking for in people? Or do you just not care who they are? I just want to have a conversation, because that's kind of how I feel about you sometimes. Like, you just want to have a conversation with anybody and everybody at any time. But I know that your conversations are intentional. So walk me through that a little bit if you can, just what you look for in someone. Is there a hunger that you look for, or especially when it comes to leading someone and raising someone up to be a leader?
Yeah, man, what a great question. I'm sitting here thinking through. I think back to that moment with you, and
quite a moment.
It was. I just thought for a moment, he needs to stop. They're praying. I mean, I just thought. Really, I thought at that moment I was going to save you from being killed by a bunch of elderly women at a church, who really love Jesus. So, when it's funny, because I think over the years I've had a lot of conversations with people, and my confidence is in what God has done through me and in me, He will do in you. And so when I sit down with someone, there are things I'm listening for. I think I would say a phrase like when they might lean in.
Sure.
And I think about all the conversations we've had over the years. We've had,
Sure.
you know, and if we were to be transparent, I think there's been a lot of good conversations and there's been a lot of hard ones.
Yeah.
And there's been seasons that were really, really close, and then seasons of separation.
Sure.
And you think, when you think about the grand scheme of what God has done, continue to do in a relationship, what I would say today is, I'm excited about what I'm about to learn. And that sounds selfish, doesn't it? So it's like, what am I about to learn? And you know, go ahead.
No, what it sounds like though is you're not looking like, I want this person to achieve this, or I want this person to produce this for me, but I get to know this person. That's what I'm hearing is, when you approach leadership, when you sit down with someone that's a potential, whether it's a church member or an employee or a worship team member or volunteer, what I'm hearing from you is, I want to get to know this person.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want, what am I going to learn? What information are they going to give me? Not what can they produce for me today? Are they going to be able to hit some goals for me or increase my metrics, right? Like, are they going to bring more people into my church, or, you know, increase my real estate business, or my, you know, all the things that you do. But what it sounds like to me is your first aim is like, what can I learn? Like, what can I glean from this person's life? Not, and I think that's a shift. A lot of leaders sit down with people and say, what can I give this person? Right? Like, what, like, I'm going to help this person. I'm going to teach them something. And instead, what I'm hearing is like, no. Like, I'm not sitting down to teach anyone anything. I want to hear from you. Like, the who the person is matters more than what I have to tell them in the moment.
Yeah, I totally.
I mean, for the leader listening today, I think that's a really important point, because leaders are passionate about what they're passionate about, right? Like, I'm passionate about what I'm passionate about. And sometimes, and we've mentioned this before, but people become a means to an end, right? Like, they become kind of the work horses that we enable to get our dream, our goal accomplished. And what you're saying, and it's good for me to hear today, is man, the relationship comes before the product. Yeah. Like, when I'm looking to lead someone and invest in someone and to love someone, I got to get to know who they are first. It reminds me of a great quote from John Maxwell, but people don't know how much you care, how much you know, until they know how much you care.
Yes,
and so asking questions and digging in someone's life and letting them know they're valuable as a person apart from their product or whatever gifting they have seems to be the primary focus in the way that you approach at least the initial stages of leadership. I think that's important for the leader to hear.
It is. And I'll tell you, when you find real joy, like and I've said this to you over the years, and there's been times it's really been challenged in me. And so I think just being transparent, and like TJ, when you walk off that stage and you've just ministered to whoever, and when you've climbed your highest mountain, you know, I don't feel like I need to be the guy on the stage. But if I was the guy that you called afterwards and said, "Let me tell you what just happened," And there was one time I said that with this romantic idea, like...
No, I'll tell you what you said. This is different, because I think this was transformative for me in my life, and I want other people to hear this. I'd totally forgotten about this until you said that. You told me one time, there was a season of my life, gosh, this is so good, for anyone that has a gifting of preaching or leading worship or any creative gift. There was a time where I was writing 4, 5, 6 songs a week or whatever, just really, you know, pumping out a bunch of songs and writing a bunch of worship music. And we were having a conversation on the phone. You said, "I have a challenge for you." Do you remember this? And you said,
vaguely.
You said, the next time you're around a group of people, the next time you're in a setting with talented people, don't pick up a guitar and don't touch the keys. Yeah. Like, and you said this, you said, who you are is more valuable than what you give. Yeah. And I was like, I still remember where I was. I was on Westover Boulevard in Albany. I was on the phone. I was like, "Yeah, that's cool, man. You know, all right, man." Oh my God, I'm valuable to God. You know, it was one of those moments. But when you think about that, like, it's not the product, it's the person. Yeah. And I think that has been important in your leadership, and why you've been able to amass people around you that love you and that you can love well, is because it's not so much about the product, but about the person, and empowering the person. And that's another, I think, for leaders listening, being a part of the win. What you're saying, what I hear you saying, is being a part of the win is still a win.
Still a win.
You know what I mean? You don't get credit. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't get credit. You don't get an award. You don't get a pat on the back. But for you, and a good quality of a good leader is being a part of the win, contributing to someone else's life that gets them a win is still a win.
Well, see, my early days with you, I didn't realize what God was setting up inside of me, a fruit that I truly love, and that is we all, and you will too, and you probably are already experienced. There's a phase in life you start to mother and father, right? And it's a certain age dynamic starts to kick in, but parents don't have any. You can quickly identify with this when your son hits a grand slam. You know, you don't run out there and say, "Remember when I hit one?" You know,
right.
You don't care.
Yeah.
You have zero desire to remember your wins. Your son just did it, and when he does it, all you can think is, "Oh my God!" You know, like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you. You know, you're excited, high fiving. Or for me, it'd be like the first time my son, like this year, this would be a good example. You know, you take your son to kill a deer. He kills his first. You know, and just like we're high five and cry. We're like, oh, it's
a huge moment.
It's a snot fest. And well, this year, my oldest son, Caleb, took my youngest son, Branson, Caleb 21, Branson 9, or maybe it was 8 at the time, but 9, hunting. And Branson kills his first deer while he's with my oldest son. And, you know, I had people ask me about that, like, what did that do to you? I said, what do you mean, what did that do to me? I got like double blessing. And here's why. Because my youngest son got the experience of killing a deer. My oldest son got the experience of fathering, giving this and celebrating somebody else versus himself. And hearing his story, hearing both of their stories, I got 2 stories out of 1. And I'm the dad that gets to sit back and say, God is so good. And it's like, well, that's easy when it's at home. But if we looked at people in our lives that when you taught me that. I always say you were one of the ones that taught me that. I see God doing things in you and through you. And sometimes I had to wrestle through, you know, my insecurities and jealous. I'm like, well, dadgummit, you know, and what just being, God was teaching me how to really let go and be like, I love it when that man went. Well, if I can love it if you win, then I can love it when somebody standing beside me saying, when, you know, she hits the big moment, I'm like, you know, it's like, I'm not faking. I'm not playing. It's like, I'm so excited about what you just did right there. It's like,
and what I think about too, like, we forget, I don't know if you're listening, you probably don't remember this movie, or you're probably not as dumb as me, so you didn't watch it, but Napoleon Dynamite. Do you remember that movie? It was like a little cult following movie for a while. Napoleon Dynamite, he's, you know, his little dance thing, the whole 9 yards. Well, like, nobody wants to hang out with Uncle Rico. You remember Uncle Rico?
Oh, yeah, Uncle Rico, yeah.
Like, he never celebrated the people around him. He was always talking about, I could throw this pig skin a quarter mile over that mountain. Like, those guys that are 30, 40, 50 years old, and all they think about or talk about is the touchdown they pass in high school. Like that becomes a tired conversation, right?
Yes, it does.
And so for the leader to be able to, I think too, leaders don't realize that it prolongs their legacy as well. Being able to gift away their influence and gift away their leadership and gift away their opportunity. Because I struggle with that too. When I mean, leading worship, that's all I ever did, right? And so I remember putting down the guitar and realizing, well, I'm not very good at following a click track anyway, so it's my team's a lot less frustrated when I put down the acoustic guitar.
Please put it down.
But like, God, TJ, would you just stop playing that thing? You never play on beat. But being able to gift those things away, and I'm in a season where I'm starting to experience and see that, like Friday night when we had so many friends across the stage, I told somebody this, and I was able to say this with genuine, like a heart. Used to, I'd been like, I want to be on stage, and I said this phrase, and it caught me when I said, man, I feel like it encapsulates really what you're communicating. Is I said the only thing that would have made our Good Friday worship service better is if I could have been in the audience.
Yeah.
Like that, and that's I think I told our friend Caitlin's dad that. I said the only thing that could have made it better, and then I did say Ashley, she's a girl that leads with us. I said if she would just sing names, and Caitlin would sing Alabaster Heart over and over, we could really just do like a 2-hour service with 2 songs. I'd be totally fine with that.
Totally agree.
But no, I like that idea of being able to give away influence and give away leadership and fight for someone else's win. It definitely displays humility, and leaders don't lack. I would say this. And this is what I've seen in your life. The church you're at now, Heritage, it's so interesting how our stories are similar. You came to Heritage on a contract basis to play some piano and sing some songs. Yeah. And you went from playing some piano and singing some songs. They talked you into being the worship leader, and then you did you did every role there. I mean, you cleaned the toilets. You've been the youth pastor. You preach some. You're the executive pastor now. in the same way, I feel like I came here to, and I started playing acoustic and then became an associate pastor, associate worship leader. For a while, they didn't even know what my title was. They just changed it so many times and then ended up being executive pastor. And what I see in your life, you being so much older than me, is that
time out.
you being older than me. What I see is that your humility, like pastors, leaders, and even in business, in the business world, men who are willing and able to give away their influence, to give away their leadership, and to give away their opportunity to their teams, who are humble enough to do that. You're one of those people in my mind who can give away those things. It prolongs their legacy of leadership. Yeah. And so I mean, because you don't want a guy who's washed up, that they're making, the team's like, you have to go. Like, please, for the love of God, leave. Instead, and I mean, you're so far away from even retiring and thinking about it, but like, you're that guy that I think you will have given so much away by the time that you end your ministry. They'll be like, well, all he's ever done is celebrated us and cheered for us. And I feel like that's a beautiful idea for a legacy of leadership. And I feel like you're in the middle of cultivating that in your life and with people around you. And that's what I would aim to do one day. What I desire is, like, when you get to the end of your ministry or you get to the end of your company, you've hired people, you've put people in place, you've done so good loving the people around you that people are like, oh, we forgot he worked here. We just thought he hung out with us and loved on us and made us, encouraged us and prayed for us. We forgot he worked here. He'd given all this away and he led everybody up to lead well. And yeah, man, that's one of the reasons I want to have a conversation, because I feel like you lead people up to lead well.
It's funny because I think what the closest people around me a lot would say, you're just this master delegator, and because if you bring it up to me, I'm probably going to suggest you do it, like, hey, tell me when, it's like, well, I think we should meet 3 times a week, and I've got, well, hey, you've got fire for that? Let's do it.
There's other people that want to meet.
It's like, let's do it.
When you want to meet 3 times a week? There are 3 people that need discipleship.
Tell me when. Tell me when you're ready. And but there's irony in that, because I think that you could get labeled that, but at the same time, the picture I sort of have in my end, like if I'm working toward this, is I fell in love with, as long as you sort of see yourself as a peer. There's a maturity level, I think, that God has to work in you to where you have to not elevate yourself in such a way that where you think, well, I'm large and you're small, but to accept what God has given you as yours, and that what He's given someone else is theirs. Yeah. And just to simply acknowledge that, and be able to acknowledge it, talk about it, and the people who can acknowledge it and talk about it and celebrate it, they're the ones that get to have long-term influence. Sure. Nobody wants to hang out with what you're saying, like, Rico, just remember when I was so good. Remember when I did blah blah blah. Remember, And did I go through phases where I wanted it to be about all me? Yes, I absolutely did. Did I want to hold the mic? I wanted to be the person. I
think that's the human condition, right? Yeah. Like we want glory, we want praise.
Yeah, you can't get away from it.
It's something that we're always rubbing against and fighting against.
And then God, I think as you mature, God develops that in you. And you know what He does? He brings little TJs along to your life, and helps you see that I just think, was it Elijah or Elisha? I always get them mixed up. But, he was crying because he's like, I'm the only one. I'm the only one. I'm carrying this burden. I'm doing this by myself. And then God's like, hey, Bubba, I've got like 10,000 more just like you. Just so you know. I mean, you're not alone. You're not by yourself. And in the
They've never bowed a knee.
Yeah, never bowed a knee.
I will say this, though. I feel like base level requirement for being an executive pastor should be able to differentiate between Elijah and Elijah.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Good. And the other side now, you bringing that point up, right, is you have to walk in humility. When I was hired at Aries Church, I was hired in a position that was above me, better than me, more talent than I had, and I had to lead people who were gifted. Yeah. And so I lived in this constant place of humility, whether I wanted to or not.
You know what I've heard over and over, and I'll say this, I've heard you say it, and other leaders that I respect, every time they transition into a new role or God takes them to another level, they always say this, or this is the phrase that I hear: "This is too big for me."
Yeah,
like this is too big for me.
That's good.
And I remember someone's response to that phrase one time. This is just this is too big for me. And the person responded and said, if you thought you were big enough for it, then you were thinking wrongly of yourself. If this seems too big for you, then you need God. It's a reminder that you need God to accomplish. This is a God-sized thing, and you need God-sized grace in your life. Like it's not just about you. So yeah, you're right. I think ultimately, like this level of humility and understanding, and understanding that it's God working through you, especially in a vocational ministry. I would argue that in every area of business and commerce, we have the opportunity for God to work through us as business owners, as as parents, in relationship, whatever. But you don't want to find yourself in a place where you're a leader, or at least I don't feel like you want to be there, to where you feel like, this is.
Well, you think about
I've done this. I've built this. This is mine.
That's right. Think about what you've just said. I know a lot of business owners that I meet with, that their number one problem is they get a guy that they've spent a lot of money, effort, energy, and training and developing, and when that guy gets to a certain place, he ejects himself and goes and does it on his own. And that's a reoccurring cycle that happens over and over again. And the dynamic that I see closely walking with that is this Rico guy is still the owner. And I'm sorry, I don't want to push anybody's buttons, but if we took that principle into the workplace and said, I'm going to celebrate my children, I'm going to treat my guys, my people, that just like their family, and I'm going to if they're winning,
no matter if they leave or not,
right?
Yeah, I'm going to invest, I'm going to develop, I'm going to love.
I'm going to love them. Well, the person getting ready to leave, guess what he struggles with doing? He doesn't want to leave. Because you know what he's not going to find? He's not going to find a family. He might find another job, and if that's all that it is, if that's the environment that's been created for him, so like even in church staffs, or it's like, well, why do people leave? Why do people swap? Because they're looking for a place to belong. They're not just looking for a paycheck. They're looking for a dad. They're looking for a spiritual father, a spiritual mother that says, you know what? I can't wait to celebrate you. I can't wait. And the great thing, I'm sitting with you today, and I'm looking at what all God's done with you. By the grace of God, I count it a great honor that, me and you, our relationship survived some stuff.
Yeah.
And you're sharing with me, what God has provided you with.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what's better than having a pond? That's what they're saying. What's better than having a pond stocked with bass is being the best friend of the guy who has a pond. Because you don't have to carry any of the weight. You don't have to carry any of the responsibility. And it's like, it's the easiest role to have, but it's the hardest one to get to because of our, I think, selfishness sometimes.
There's something that you said that I want to circle back to, because it struck me, and it reminded me of a season that my wife and I walked through. We were foster parents for about 4 or 5 years here in Tift County. There were over 100 kids in foster care, and I think 14 homes at the time. So kids in foster care in Tift County were being sent all over the state. And my primary concern, the reason I said no, my wife Tay was like, "Oh, this God is calling us." And I'm like, "You better pray hard." I don't think I don't hear nothing, crickets. And
I'm deaf all of a sudden.
And so, anyways, God was like, "No, TJ, you're dumb, and you're also called." Like, I've been trying to say this to you for a while. So, but I remember getting to this place in foster care of, my time, my talent, my energy, my sleep, my money. I was investing in loving. We had kids in our home, a few kids, one little guy that stayed for several years, and he called me dad. I was the only dad that he had ever known. And so it was dad this and dad that. And I remember asking the question, someone like, what if I love him so much that I don't recover when he's reunified? Yeah. And someone said, then you did it right. They're like, you did it right.
Yeah.
If you're broken and wounded by his departure, then you loved him well and you loved him right. And man, when you said that, I thought that's the kind of leadership the world's missing. Yes, is leadership that says, I'm going to invest in you, I'm going to love you, I'm going to provide for you, I'm going to build you up, and even if you leave, I love you. I want you to win. I want you to win.
That's right.
Right?
There's a passage, if I could share, that you made me think of, and I think it's in Luke. It's either 4, 5, 6, or 7, right? Maybe 8. Who knows? But it's in Luke, right? But it's John.
You sure it's not in the book of Elijah?
Well, who knows? John is been telling his disciples that there's one coming.
Yeah.
Okay. And so Jesus shows up. John goes out, baptizes Jesus, has a conversation. Well, when he comes back to his disciples, John's disciples are upset. And here's what they're saying. They say to him this is kind of the language they use, is that man that you met in the river. Now, they're talking about Jesus. And so they said, that man that you were in the river with, you were baptizing, all the people are going to him now, and he's baptizing more than us. And, you know, and if you've ever been to I know you've been over, but the Jordan's not this vast, wide river. It's, you know, there's
a creek.
Yeah, you could hear the disciples talking, you know. So they were fussing with themselves. They were fussing with each other. And John reminds them, he says this to his disciples. He said, I've told you from the beginning that there was one coming who's mightier than I. And he says, he said, I've told you from the very beginning that I am not the one, but I'm the one who's coming. And he makes a statement that I think goes right along with what we're talking about. He says, the bridegroom, when the friend of the bridegroom hears the voice of the bridegroom, his joy is full. And so what he's saying, when you look across the river, this 8 feet of water right here, and you see them baptizing more people than us, you're frustrated because they're doing something
you're not getting to do it.
You're not getting to do it.
Yeah.
And he says, but when I see it, my joy is full. And then he makes this statement, do you not know that you can only receive from heaven what's been given to you? Like
that's good.
To just simply understand, John knew, I'm the pre-runner. I'm the forerunner. I'm the one, I've got a job to do. And so when he saw Jesus standing there, his joy was full because he was doing more than he was supposed to, right?
Yeah, that's good.
And it's like, well, if church leaders, especially if pastors and at every department, if we could be constantly looking not for the role we're supposed to be filling, but that, man, there's God's going to send people to me that are better than me. They're stronger than me. They're more articulate than me. They can play the guitar better than me. They can stay on the click. They can hit the high notes. They can organize better than me. Well, we get to essentially step back and have full joy.
Being the best man and not the groom.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
The best man throws the party.
That's right.
The best man gets to have fun. The best man celebrates everybody in the room.
He has a special place. And it's like, well, we eject ourselves out of that. And I've done that. I've missed it. But as leaders, it's like, you know, having that opportunity to say my joy. So here today, my joy is full. Yeah. Friday night when I was singing with you, watching that, if I sang a half a note or whatever part, I got to fully experience, you know. Yeah. And so when I'm standing on a Sunday morning and I see somebody stepping up in their gift, I'm like, my joy is full. It's full.
That makes me think too. You never hear someone, like if you're asked to be a maid of honor or the best man, you never hear someone saying, I can't believe they asked me to be the best man and not the groom at this wedding. I'm supposed to be the groom. You know what I mean? Like how awkward would that be? You're like, hold on a second. You're uninvited.
Yeah.
We never want to see you again.
Escort this guy out right here, please.
I mean, think about it. Like we don't think about ministry in that context though. And even with Jesus being the bridegroom, we're like, no. Let me have the attention.
It's funny that John's disciples were so busy trying to disciple more people that their reference to Jesus was that man that you met in the river. Like they missed the whole story because they were captivated with tunnel vision on we're supposed to be baptizing
this is what
more
I'm
people.
Doing.
Yeah, this is what I'm exactly. Yeah. So captivated by that, they missed the part that it was the Messiah that John was baptizing in the river. I'm like, and if you're not careful, when you're working with people, you'll see people all around you that unfortunately that's our job to elevate that conversation, you know. But that's to me that's the tension that lives in church staffs, you know, whether it's music, no matter what you're doing, it's like there's the guy their joy is full, you know, and then there's the ones that are like, well, what about me, you know, and it's like, man, okay, that tension is challenging. But anyway,
man, that's awesome. I think we live in that tension, this continual tension of it. One, two. I think it points back to Scripture. I mean, what did he say? That guy that Mark's talking about said, "I must decrease."
That's exactly right.
So that he can increase. So great leadership ultimately is this idea that we do over time decrease to elevate the people around us and increase them. Like John took a back seat to Jesus because Jesus was Jesus, right? Like someone better, someone stronger, someone, you know, the Messiah
I'm not even
comes on
worthy
the
to
scene.
open
Let me decrease so that he can increase.
When's the last time a lead pastor celebrated his worship pastor that way? That, man, you're so amazing, dude. I mean, like just having that heart, that takes me, I appreciate you bringing that, but to me, it brings that full circle back to when do you lean in on someone? When do you, it's like, the thing is, I've learned this in the last few years, you can't change anybody. You can't change anyone but yourself.
That's good. Yeah.
You can't change anyone but you. So if you live your life thinking, I'm going to change, boy, I'm about to drop some bombs here and change you, you're not going to impact them at all. But if you walked around thinking, what can I learn today? Like I'm just telling you, very purposeful. I'm in this room with you guys, and I'm thinking, I'm excited about our conversation because I'm thinking, genuinely, what can I learn today? What can I go away with and be different and change? What can I take back to the people? And it's like, well, I know we're supposed to say stuff like that, but that goes back to having perspective of who you are, and when you get that perspective that I'm the only one that can change. The only change I can bring is me. I can't change my wife. I can't change my kids. I can't change my best friend. I can't change TJ. TJ can't change me. But who can we change? We can change ourselves and be better. And that's where the tide starts to change. And so it's like, well, I'm sitting down with little TJ. Years ago, I wouldn't have been able to articulate it that way, but I'm like, what am I about to learn? This kid's shooting paintballs at, like, I was excited to know you. I'm like, and then, you forgot to mention the BB gun that the guy, stops, he's riding a bicycle, comes to the house and says, hey.
There's a police officer. I would leave that out because there's a police officer.
Can you stop the kid from shooting me with a BB gun?
I also love that I'm 36 and we've been friends for 24 years and I still get referred to as little TJ. I think that's endearing. I love it.
I know. Other people call you lead pastor or executive pastor one day.
You're little TJ.
And so.
No, but man, I love that. I know for me, and I think a lot of people listening, that idea of when you sit down with someone, if you can't take away, if I don't take away anything else, it's that thing of, it's the idea that, man, I really need to slow down and enjoy the time I have with people, not with the intention of getting a product from them, but wondering, thinking, dreaming, what can I learn from this person?
Yeah.
What does God have for me? What rests in their heart, in their ideas, in their talents, and their giftings that I can learn from?
Yeah.
Like, make me a student. I guess the idea is, God, make me a student of you and of people.
Yeah.
Like help me to learn from people, so that I can grow and be who I'm called to be. And that's really ultimately leadership, right? Like exchanging ideas, exchanging vision, and learning from one another.
Yeah, I'd like to add one small thing to that, and because I think it and it works everywhere, right? So, like my older boys, I have the 21-year-old and about to be 19, and then the 9-year-old. When they're little, I would love to learn from them, just hear how they thought about the world. The what if. Hey, Dad, what if all the clouds just fell out of the sky right now? What would you do? I'm like, it's like I want to listen to those kinds of things. And then they get to a certain age, and then there's an expectation that starts to come out of you. And instead of listening to your kids, now you're looking for some sort of product. And when you start to look for the product, they start to check out. And so I'm saying that if you're listening and you're a parent, maybe you're a dad and you're struggling to get along with your son, if I had a nugget to give away inside of this, I think it's like going back just to learn that my son at a certain age, he's going to be who God desires him to be. And I have to trust God to save him and to whatever,
Sure.
And then I get to just simply enjoy seeing the world through his eyes, which sometimes I think, well, that's dumb as dirt. I mean, whatever, but to enjoy that.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you right now, because that's what God's working on me personally, is at home is easy when they're 4 and 5, but when they're 18, 19, when they're young TJ, like trying to find his way, just enjoying, like, man, this is about to be a roller coaster. And it's like, it's hard as a parent. It's hard.
Sure.
It's hard as an employer. It's hard as a leader and at a church. But to enjoy that, the knowing of who they are. And it's like, man, I had no idea you saw the world that way. And man, okay, now that I know that helps me because it challenges my perspective. And then at the same time, the next time I come to interact with you, I'm a little smarter. I'm a little better. I have a little, I understand what you like. And I think we just miss that so many times making tying all the circles back together. We miss that with the people around us. Like, man, because if it's all about product, we'll put people in the wrong positions. We'll promote them in the wrong places. But if it's really about, I get to celebrate who you are.
Yeah.
And I don't have any insecurities robbing me from that. Well, it's like, I'm so. Again, I get to come back. I'm like, TJ Malden, my little brother. He'll never get to escape that. And I remind him, and it's like, you're my little brother. And I tell people, I say, that's my little brother. And like, well, I didn't know you had a little brother. I said, well, I really don't. I adopted this guy years ago. And sometimes I wished I hadn't. And then there's, but at the same time, it's amazing what you get to learn.
Sure.
It's a continual process, but.
And I think that pattern of leadership too, being willing to get in other people's lives, because getting in their lives, getting someone to do something for you is easy.
Yeah.
Getting to know someone is messy.
Yeah. What about when the dad shows up with his son and says, "Hey, can my son hang out with you for a little while?"
Right. Yeah.
I was like, we don't want to talk about that, do we?
Yeah. The end of the story where you raised me a little bit when I was, probably 14, 15. And then your son came to live with me his freshman year of college. I was like, would you just take a shower, please? God, get out of the bed. No, he's wonderful. I love KK. But, man, listen, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I say it all the time, and I tell people this all the time. I hope people were able to listen and tell us real quick, just before we get off, of this podcast, I want you to just tell us a little bit about your wife and your kids. Give me 2 minutes. Just tell me who they are and how much you love them.
Yeah, Kelly, I've got a beautiful bride she's a few years younger than me, so no need to dig into that too far. But
no, I think it is. I think now that you said it, I can take about 2 minutes.
Now, if you're listening, 2 minutes, and I want to get 30 seconds.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
So we have this joke, Mark. Kelly's how much younger than you?
She's 6 years younger.
Yeah, she's 6 years younger. And she just happens to be a year older than me. And I used to tell people all the time it was very difficult in our church setting for me to date, because Mark dated all the girls that were my age. But I mean, it's whatever. Y'all are married and God's been glorified.
Buddy. I'm sorry. He has been glorified. But anyway, I've got the wife of my youth still, okay, which is a blessing. And she's an amazing woman, full of fire and passion. And we have 3 boys. Our oldest one, Caleb's 21, and super gifted guy. And I'm looking forward to seeing what God molds out of him. And then our middle son, we named him Mark the Third. So he's a Mark Cunningham the Third. And we get asked about that all the time. And Kelly just would not let me name. I wanted to name one of our boys if we had one. I thought when Caleb come along, I'm like, we got a boy this time. She wasn't having that. He was going to be Caleb. And so I did get to pick a middle name for him. So, but little Mark loves music. He's a very passionate guy as well. And our Branson, 9-year-old, he's like he's almost like a grandchild. It's funny because Caleb, he could have touch a phone, and I was afraid he was going to break it. Branson, when he was a baby, was dragging it across concrete, and I'm like, laughing. It's just funny what God does in you. But we get to measure that. But anyway. Love our family. Of course, I'm at Heritage over in Moultrie, and just been there for, I guess, 16, 17 years, and loving that and enjoying that, and love being here today. So I appreciate you inviting me on.
Mark, listen, I say this, and I don't say this lightly, and I'll say this as we go, but you are and continue to be one of the greatest influences in my life, and I'm incredibly grateful for how God has gifted my life with your presence, and in seasons, your fathering, the willingness to take the time to have the conversation. And I think Heritage is blessed, your family's blessed, and to this day, hands down, top 5 favorite male singers on the planet.
Come on. Whoa.
I know. The team told me not to tell you that. They're like, don't tell TJ. Listen, just don't tell Mark how good he can sing. And I'm like, he knows. That's
Come
the problem.
on.
But I just want to say, man, we are really honored that you would hang out with us today on the podcast. And thank you for your time. And pray blessings on you, man.
Yeah,
thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. Listen, you can subscribe. All of those things would mean a whole lot to us. Thank you for hanging out with us on the TJ Malden Leadership Podcast.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the TJ Malden Leadership Podcast, where we talk about life, leadership, and the gospel. If you enjoyed this episode, share with a friend. For more content, follow us on Instagram and YouTube. If you have any questions you would like to ask TJ, whether it is about life, leadership, or the gospel, you can email those to tjmaldenleadershippodcast@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening, and we hope you join us again on the TJ Malden Leadership Podcast.